Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to our Saturday edition video here in World of Warships, where we're going to be looking at the Pan-European Tier 8 Destroyer, the Öland, and doing an upgrade and commander build. So we'll be talking about the ship, brief overview, we'll look at the modules, the upgrades, consumables, and polishing it off with the commander build and some possible variations that you can take there. So first, as normal, we talk about what type of destroyer the Öland is, which I did briefly touch on yesterday. You have three types of destroyers. You have gunboat destroyers, you have torpedo destroyers, and you have hybrid destroyers, which is a mix of both. And in my opinion, Öland kind of falls into the hybrid category, but she leans more towards a gunboat destroyer, is what I would say. When you look at her artillery, if I click the right one, she's got these 120mm guns. She's got two of them. They have a reload time of 2.5 seconds. So there's one on the front, there's one on the back. But they have a limited gun range if you do not take the main battery and, is it AA specialist I'm thinking of, or AA expert? We'll have a look. And then with her torpedoes, she's got these 533mm triple tubes. She's got two racks of them. They have a longer range of 12 kilometers. So then the argument's kind of like, well, maybe she leans a little bit more towards a torpedo destroyer. But to me, that's not the case, just because those torpedoes are not hard-hitting torpedoes. They have very weak damage output. You can see here maximum damage 10,700, and that's not even taking into account ships that have torpedo belt protection that reduces that damage. But I find a lot of success with her guns and particularly her AA. So let's go ahead and look at the modules for the Öland. So as far as the main battery is concerned, there's no upgrade there. You go from a hull A to hull B. The difference being is that you're getting a buff in the hit point pool, which is really important because the Öland doesn't have the most health as a Tier 8 destroyer, so you want to be taking the survivability expert, which we have on our commander. And then you also get a buff, slight buff to your A defense and maneuverability. Torpedoes, you're going to be going from a reload time of, see right here, 59 seconds to these, which are 70 seconds. The trade-off is that you're getting much more damage out of the upgraded torpedoes, because 7,533 is not a lot of damage, where you get over 10,700, and these are the 80 knots torpedoes. So these, that was my mistake in yesterday's video. I had referenced, do I have torpedo speed? Oh, it's a... because of our torpedo tubes modification. Otherwise, in yesterday's video, I said that the torpedoes stock are 73 knots, which is true, but I had forgotten about that upgrade in slot 3. So we have 80 knot torpedoes, so it doesn't take them very long to get across the map. So I prefer the torpedoes that do a little more damage, even though they're still somewhat lacking, but that's just how the Pan-European destroyer line works. The gunfire control system, the stock system has a 9.2 kilometer, but then you can upgrade to 10.1, which is still rather lacking at the tier, high tier, when you're top tier, versus like yesterday's video reversing Tier 6. It's not so noticeable, but when you're all of a sudden a Tier 8 destroyer and facing Tier 10s, then that 10.1 kilometer main battery range really does become a bit of a struggle, if you will, especially when you're dealing with ships with 10 kilometer up to 12 kilometer radar. So yeah, so propulsion 35 knots without the ceramic flag or the engine boost activated. As far as upgrades go, you have 5 slots at Tier 8. I have elected to go for main armaments modification 1. That reduces the risk of your main battery and your torpedo tubes from becoming incapacitated by negative 20%. Also improves your main battery and torpedo tube survivability by 50%. And then if either of those two get knocked out, the repair time is reduced by 20%. The auxiliary armaments modification 1, you'd only be taking this for the AA mount survivability because you don't have secondaries on the Öland. To me, I still lean more towards the main armaments because you don't always know if you are going to be getting a match with carriers. Yesterday, we had a match with 2 carriers, so that was actually rather nice, but we didn't get to make too much use of the AA. Magazine modification 1, risk of your ship's magazine detonating at negative 70%. When you're playing randoms, ranked, clan battles, you always want to be taking the Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates risk of your ship's magazine detonating, something that the Mutsu in yesterday's video did not take. Slot 2, you have a couple options. The damage control system modification 1, don't run at all on any destroyer. This is more something for cruisers and battleships when you are often going to be a high detected target in taking HE shell damage and chances of setting on fire, as well as eating some torpedoes. Engine room protection is what I have gone for. The risk of the engine becoming incapacitated is reduced by negative 20%. The repair time, negative 20%. And then the same for the steering gears from becoming incapacitated. So you're protecting your maneuverability as well as your speed. So that's something that's really nice. And then you get 2 options here, which I'm going to revisit when we talk about them in the consumables. For slot 3, you have main battery modification 2. This improves your main battery traverse speed, which to me is not bad. It is 18 seconds, so as far as destroyer goes, it could be better. But to me, it's not that noticeable. I just try to work on the side of having my guns focus in the direction that I want them to be in. You have another AA gun modification, the priority A sector time, preparation time, negative 20%. To me, I don't really find this to be something that I really wish to have on the Öland, where something more like the last 2 options, like the aiming systems modification 1, this is something that I normally always recommend. It is a really good one, specifically for the maximum main battery shell dispersion is negative 7%, so you're getting tighter groups. But because one of the fun things with the Öland is the speed that you can be increasing on these torpedoes. So I want the enemy to have a less of a reaction time to the torpedoes when they spot them in the water coming at them. Because it buffs your torpedo speed by plus 5%, you get the torpedo tube's traverse speed plus 20%, as you would here in the aiming systems modification 1. And then the risk of your torpedoes from becoming incapacitated is negative 40%. So, in my opinion, either of these are really good. Just because one of the things about Öland, on top of having a pretty good reload time, despite only having 2 turrets on the ship, 4 guns in total, is this unique 80-knot torpedoes that you can get just with this first upgrade. So that's why I have elected to choose this, and you could see that our torpedoes weren't taking very long to get across the map yesterday in the battle. So that means, the faster your torpedoes are, the maybe more chances you have of them hitting, but because these are kind of more narrow spread torpedoes and you don't get very many, it's really noticeable, especially on the Öland until you get up to the next 2 tier higher. For the slot 4, you have damage control system modification 2. Again, this is something more like a cruiser, battleship that you would take. I've gone for the propulsion modification. The time taken to reach full engine power when accelerating is reduced by negative 50%. So that means, for myself, if I'm utilizing a friendly smoke and there's torpedoes coming, I need to get out of the way. Maybe I'm trying to do a little bit of open gunboating, which is a bit of a struggle with Öland because of that 10-kilometer main battery gun range, unless you spec up to over 12 kilometers with the commander's skill. I use it more in the sense of when I'm fighting other destroyers, when I'm trying to juke and avoid some incoming fire. The same argument can be made for the steering gears modification 1. I know some players prefer one over the other. I am one who prefers the propulsion modification 1. The maneuverability, when you're looking at the rotor shift time, is 3.4 seconds. So to me, it's not bad. So that's kind of why I still lean for the propulsion modification 1. The depth charges, we don't have submarines for this patch and the next patch. So this is something, you might not always get submarines in your match, but you're always going to have your engine, right? Or you're just a sitting duck during the battle. For slot 5, you have torpedo lookout system. This is something maybe you'd see more on a cruiser battleship, that you can make a build out of this with their hydroacoustic search. I have gone for the concealment system modification 1. We don't have a camouflage on right now, but we're sitting at 6 kilometers. So if we add a camouflage on, I'll just throw this one on. Our detectability range by sea gets down to 5.8, and you can see by air it's 2.6. So it's actually quite nice sitting at the tier. I think 5.8 to the 6 range is most common at tier 8 in terms of destroyers. I mean, you have some like the British Premium, the Kolsik, that gets down to 5.5, I believe it is. So you're doing pretty good because there's a lot of other destroyers at tier 8 that can have a lot higher detectability range than what you do in the Öland. So I like to improve upon this. Also because of reduces the detectability by squadron detectability range, but also when there's ships firing at you, dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship is increased by plus 5%, means they have a harder time landing shots on you. Steering gears modification 2. Again, the rudder shift doesn't bother me that much. This is something I'd see if you were really a pure open gun boat and you didn't really care about your concealment. So something like the Khabarovsk. The Khabarovsk has a terrible rudder shift time. It feels like you're driving a cruiser. So then maybe you use something like that. But again, for me on Öland, it doesn't matter. Consumable action time increased by plus 10%, which means you'd be getting a little bit more use out of your repair party, damage control party, engine boost, defensive AA. But again, I still like the strength in destroyers tends to lie in their concealment. So as far as consumables go, we have your standard damage control party, action time of 5 seconds, reload time of 40 seconds, pretty standard on all destroyers. You have a repair party, partially restores the ship's HP by repairing any light damage. You can see HP per second, 169. And if you really want to get the most out of your heal, you can take the India Delta combat signal, and you're going to see that goes up to 202. So whenever I'm running a destroyer that has the option of taking the repair party and I'm running it, I like to take that India Delta combat signal because it means in the long term I'm gaining more health back when I'm having destroyer on destroyer engagements. The engine boost and defensive AA we saw in slot 2. You have the engine boost modification 1 and the defensive fire modification 1. So let's look at the engine boost first. It increases your maximum speed plus 8%. The action time of the consumable is 120 seconds, and the reload time is 120 seconds, so 2 minutes for each. If you take the modification here, it increases your action time by plus 30%. So if I pull up my calculator, you add 36 seconds on. So you're getting 156 seconds, so it's 2.5 minutes action time on your engine boost. And it's not bad. You could be doing that. You know, often, sometimes I find myself taking this. And then you have your defensive AA fire consumable. What this does when you activate it, it improves your continuous damage by plus 50%. And the damage from shell explosions plus 300%. Consumable action time, 40 seconds, reload time, 80 seconds. So the modification here, it increases your action time, but it also reduces the reload time of the consumable. So by 20%, so that should be 8 seconds. Yeah, so 48 seconds instead of 40 seconds. The problem I have when I don't tend to take this is mostly because usually, you know, once a carrier that gets more than 2 drops off of you, that usually happens in a time span of 40 seconds. So I'm like, oh, I've only had another 8 seconds of defensive A fire consumable. I don't really have that as a challenge in my mind with Öland. So really, I would lean more towards the engine room protection and the engine boost modification 1. I think other of these are good choices. If you get this, it takes you into the armory, and you spend if with coupon, I think instead of it being 17,000 coal, with coupon it's 12,500 coal. So, and it comes back up in one day. So, for me, I just lean towards the engine protection, but I think the engine boost modification one is a fine option as well. You can also increase your AA damage by taking the November Echo Set 7. So you're going to see how that ends up taking a bump in the AA defense. So continuous damage 152, damage by shell explosions 1,617, and then you stack defensive AA fire consumable on top of that. You're looking pretty good with the buff there on the continuous damage and damage from shell explosions. But Öland is going to struggle against Tier 10 carriers, like any other Tier 8 destroyer would, even the Kid. But she'll be able to stand her ground for the most part with a Tier 8 carrier. Doesn't mean she's going to be able to stop the drop. But on a Tier 6 carrier, she can possibly drop all the planes out of the sky before a Tier 6 carrier would be able to land a salvo on her. So let's go ahead and talk about the commander. Right now I just have a standard normal commander on my Öland, Thorsten Carlson. We're about to hit 14 points. You can see how close we are to 14 points. It's kind of funny. So we'll just use 27 Elite Commander XP just to take him up to 14, because that's rather trollish wargaming. But this is what I have right now. Now, what I want to run, and what we're going to do today, is that you can purchase a commander who I spoke of yesterday. Again, I don't know if I'm even going to pronounce this name correctly, but it is this guy right here. In the past, you could obtain him through a campaign, but I had just started playing the game not too long in when I didn't have capability of being able to obtain him through the campaign. So Wargaming eventually brought him back into the armory for 175,000 coal. He's a unique commander, and he comes with 10 skill points. So ideally, if you're grinding up the line to get to Holland, I mean, you're going to be running this guy on your Holland, right? He has some pretty good stuff here. He has talents. He has the AA gun expert. So once you have shot down 20 hostile aircraft, you get a continuous AA damage buff of plus 10%. And then you also get a torpedo armament expert. Reduces the reload time of the torpedoes for every 8 successful torpedo hits scored on enemy ships. So I think in yesterday's video we got 7 torpedo hits in total. So if we would have gotten 8 and we had Jerzy Ţwirski on our Öland, then we would have had this reduced reload time of -5%. And that's for every 8 torpedoes. So this stacks on top of itself. So as you see, it can be activated multiple times per battle. So you get 16 torpedo hits, then you're looking at a -10% torpedo reload time. I think it's a bit harder on something like the Skan, the Öland, to get that many torpedo hits because you only have they're fast, but you only have 6 torpedoes with the 2 torpedo tube sets. So it's a little difficult, but when you get up to the higher tiered pan-European destroyers, they come with more torpedoes. So that's more what I have in mind, particularly with Holland. You also get an enhanced skill of Adrenaline Rush. So rather than the standard -0.20%, it's a -0.25%. So that means your main battery, your torpedo tube reload time are getting decreased, meaning they're improving, and you can get a little buff to your AA damage. So it's really good. And of course, you get the personalizations here. So I think what we're actually going to go ahead and do in this video is I'm going to go ahead and whale. I'm going to purchase him. I have 300,000 coal. So this doesn't hurt so bad. I just used the coupon for purchasing the Stalingrad for steel. So this call is basically just for commanders and eventually building up a bit more coal for ships. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our commander. And what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm actually just going to go ahead and send him to the reserve. And we're going to go ahead and pull him on. So as far as your standard 10 point bread and butter build you're going to have on a destroyer is this. So you get preventive maintenance, reduces the risk of your main turrets, your torpedo tubes, just steering gears, and engine from becoming incapacitated by -30%. The next skill is the last stand. What this does is that the ship remains partially able to sustain speed and maneuverability with the engine and steering gears incapacitated. So this means if your engine's knocked out, you're not just a sitting duck in the water. And if your rudder steering gears gets knocked out, it means you're not just going to be making circles if you hand the steering gears in a turning position. So it's really important to have that intact as a destroyer player. And then you want to have the survivability expert for 6 points. It increases your health pool for each ship tier by plus 350, which that is what gets us to the 16,900. Without it, it's 14,100, which is really bad as a tier 8 destroyer. So you really want to be having survivability expert. And then that concealment. So without concealment expert, you can see we're 6.5, but we throw it on 5.8 and also reducing our detectability range by air to 2.6. So what I like about concealment expert in particular when it comes to AA type destroyers like the Öland, like the Kid, is what I was talking about in yesterday's video, where you have your AA off, you let the aircraft carrier player get to, like, let's say 3 kilometers, and then you pop the defensive AA, and then you priority sector your AA, and you can really catch them off guard, and I kind of refer to it as baiting in the aircraft carrier player. Versus if you just have it on at the 5.8 range, then what happens is, or 6 kilometer range, excuse me, is if you try to, you have this on and then you pop on your defensive AA in priority sector, the enemy CV player is just probably going to fly outside of it if he knows that the Öland has, he's aware Öland has a really good AA. So we'll go ahead and master that. So maybe I can utilize some Elite Commander XP later on to get some higher up, because it's really nice when you are able to utilize more of these skills, especially as a destroyer player. To me, to have an enjoyable experience in World of Warships when I'm playing a destroyer, I at least have to have 10 skill points on my commander when I'm in random battles, clan battles, ranked. Otherwise, you're just you're already like kind of like one arm tied behind your back. So for a 13-point build, I intend to go for Adrenaline Rush. This is the enhanced skill I was speaking of. So it works out really well, especially when you're having a better reload time on your main battery and your torpedo tube reload time as well once you've taken some damage and this skill activates. After that, I intend on taking the Fill the Tubes, which reduces our reload time by -10%. So right now, our reload time on these torpedoes is 70 seconds. So that means we're going to shave 7 seconds off. So now we're down to 63 seconds. So we're just barely over a minute. So again, talking about that torpedo speed and that range, it's really nice to hone in on that. So it really does make Öland, in my mind, a kind of a complicated destroyer of how much I would rate it as a hybrid destroyer that leans towards guns or a hybrid destroyer that leans towards torpedoes. Just because the lack of torpedoes she has and the lack of damage they do, but she only has 2 guns, but they have a good reload time. So there's a lot of caveats with it only when you're trying to put her in between the gunboat and torpedo line. Another thing you can do if you want to focus a little bit more on torpedoes is you can take this, which means our torpedoes go from 80 knots to 84 knots. And this is something that I think for myself I want to do with this commander. One of the things that's important to keep in mind when you're going up a line, like let's say you are specifically training a commander for the tier 10 ship ultimately in that line. You want to go ahead and start trying to build that commander maybe more towards that tier 10 ship you have in mind than the tier 7 destroyer you have on as an example. But oftentimes it really builds off itself and there's not too much variation there. So I want to have really fast torpedoes. So even a harder time for the enemy team to react. And then what I'm feeling next is the main battery and AA specialist, which improves your main battery reload time. So right now it's 2.5 seconds. We take the skill, it drops down to 2.4 seconds. And we also get the AA damage buff, which on the Öland actually means something because you have good AA on the Öland. So this is something that I envision as what I am intending to take on the Öland. If I was to make a build for Öland, this is what I would do. Now, there are some other options here you can take. This is by no means what I would maybe like the best. For me, it's the best with my playstyle, with what I have in mind right now. And my mind might change as I get up to Holland. But this is something that's a pretty standard hybrid destroyer build here, because you're all these skills build off each other. Adrenaline Rush helps out the torpedo reload time, helps out the main battery reload time, and you're building into the trait of the Öland of being that hybrid type destroyer with decent reload time on the guns that are really good, and also just over a 1 minute reload time on the torpedo tubes. Now, some other things we could be doing here with the Öland is if the main battery range really bothers you at the 10.1 kilometers, you could go for the main battery and AA expert. So now our range gets up to 12.1, and you're even having more damage from AA shell explosions. So you could do something like this as an example. Let's say you really want to make your ship more of an AA beast, which in my mind sounds really good. You could go for this. This is a line that I'm still experimenting with, so just know I'm trying to just share with you some options that I think would complement the Öland really well. And I'm still debating in my mind, what would I ultimately like to take with the Öland? Because, with that range, when you get the buff up to 12.1, but you're also getting that buff to your AA defense. So if I drop these off, you see where they're at. 167, 1,860. So things start looking really good, and then you throw in defensive AX consumable on top of that. You're getting really good numbers if you just hate dealing with carriers in the battle and you just want to do as much damage to them. When I take Kid in at Tier 8, the American Premium Destroyer, I really like trying to do as much damage to aircraft. But I have a little bit more of a hybrid build, not so much an AA build with the Kid. So that is another really good option. Just know that with this type of build, you are giving up building into the torpedoes. So this is more of a main battery focused build. And you're giving yourself a little bit of awareness when taking the incoming fire alert. So I don't view this as a bad build by any means. I think it's a really good one. And it's really attractive to me when I'm looking at, this as being a possible build, than going something like this. This also looks really good to me, if I'm being honest. And I'm kind of torn between those two. Another route you can go, I know some people like to have RPF on this line. So then you're probably looking at maybe something like, you could do that. You definitely still want to be taking your Adrenaline Rush. And then maybe you really want to get the range out, or if the range doesn't bother you so much, then I would suggest something like that. This, in my mind, I could see these three options being really good for the Öland. I'm just thinking. Yeah, I like it. Another thing I haven't really talked about is the Superintendent. It'd give you an additional defensive AA, and engine boost, and an additional heal. Let's say you really wanted that, then you could do that as an option. So you can still get fast torpedoes, or maybe you want to take priority target because you feel like you need that. Yeah, but to me, in my mind, I like this build a lot, and I like that build a lot when I'm looking at the Öland, and also having the Holland in mind. So I have a little bit of time to think on it, because now we just put this commander on. We don't even have enough for Adrenaline Rush yet, naturally, because that's what I'm going to be doing next. And it gives me a little bit of time to think about if I really want to go this route, or if I'd really rather go that route. Another thing to keep in mind is, you know, for example, let's look real quick, just really quick. We won't take much time on it. Let's look at the Holland. Because I'm really, okay, 10.5 stock. Okay. So that was something that was really on my mind. I was just wondering about the main battery range. So your main battery range isn't really going to improve that much from the Öland, just 0.4 kilometers. And if you're wanting to make that build for the Holland into the guns, then I can see maybe this. But at the same time, I still see this as being, so to me these would be the two build options I would be going for with Öland. And then also with Holland in mind. So this one, I'm clicking too much. This could be a good route to go. And then you could do something like that. Or something like that. So really just up to you. This video has already gone on 31 minutes. So I really don't want to go into why I don't take these other skills. So if you have a question regarding why I didn't recommend another skill, just ask me in the comments below on this video, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I think we achieved the main purpose of this. And if you are rocking the Öland already, or even the Holland, I'd be interested to know what your build options, what you're building with the commander, and just kind of sharing that, that we as a community can kind of have this discussion together. Because, you know, that kind of mix between the guns and the torpedoes, or just all the guns and AA, both are really intriguing options to me. So I'd really be interested to know what you run on the Öland, and even on your Holland as well in the comments. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you did not, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you are subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, and we will catch you next time. Take care.